The days feel so long at this latitude.
Hello and welcome to Gaming Respawn Reviews. I am Will and today we'll be looking at Worms WMD on PS4, a title that recalls the heyday of the series and attempts to recapture some of the magic that its predecessors used to have. Does it succeed? Well, let's find out. Worms WMD tells the tale of a young worm who falls in love with a worm from a rival family, and the ensuing war will test the very bond that they have only so recently developed. And in the end, the young worms will have to go on a journey of deep interpersonal discovery and introspection until they truly realise the nature of their own existence. No, that was a dream I had last night. Worms doesn't have a story. Moving on. Here we go. Much more getting into the true meat and bones of the game. The gameplay in Worms WMD has taken a few steps back and returns to the classic style of the old games. The major change is the switch back to a 2D perspective and control scheme, as well as the removal of things like water physics and classes, which is nice for old school players. The gameplay really has moved back into the territory of the original game series, much to the benefit of the game's playability. Once again, you control your team of worms on a battlefield against up to 4 opponents, either your friends or the AI, and you have an arsenal of weapons to explode, shoot up, and in general just sort of maim the opposing team. Most of the skill of the game comes from choosing the correct weapon for the situation and aiming it correctly, factoring things like the terrain and wind. Other than that, knowing when to chase down health packs or new weapon drops is key to victory, but it's the sort of game that you can just pick up with a group of friends and play a few rounds for fun. A big part of the game that has made a comeback is the inclusion of a build your own team feature, and allowing you to design your own team down to the team names, the tombstones they leave behind when they die, and the voices they use to shout at you with. It's much easier to enjoy a game about killing tiny creatures when you're invested in their success or failure because you basically created them like some sort of cruel, malevolent god. Also, you can create a team called Bums and name all the worms after different terms for poop, which is nice. Another new addition is the inclusion of 2 new tactical elements, vehicles and buildings. For the first time in the series, random vehicles will be dropped on the map for your worms to use, ranging from tanks and jeeps to helicopters and jets. At first you might think that these vehicles are always a good move, and you'll race to get them before anyone else, but they do come with drawbacks. For one thing, you can't move too well in most of them, and for another, they explode once they run out of health and damage the worm who is using them, so think carefully before just hopping in. The buildings mechanic also offers an interesting point of strategy, as you can now hide inside buildings to be safe, or rather safer, from bombing runs, or even to spring a surprise trap from a worm that everyone has forgotten was hidden in a building for the past 9 turns. Obviously these buildings are useful, but they too have the drawback of sometimes making aiming difficult, albeit this drawback is less of a drawback than you find with the vehicles. As well as random battles, there are also missions and challenges to complete, although these are basically just random scenarios that try to fulfill the need for a single player campaign that most games feel the need for these days. Honestly, these challenges are unnecessary, but I suppose it's nice to have them if you can't find any friends to play with and don't want to keep fighting the AI opponents anymore. Overall, the return to this gameplay is much more welcome, and the new features add a surprising amount of freshness to the old formula. Having said that, the gameplay hasn't aged super well, so you might get a little frustrated with it after a while. It can be a bit clunky trying to manoeuvre your worms around the little islands or caves that you fight in. The graphics have been updated nicely, and the game looks very smooth and polished in blistering HD. It's much easier to tell your teams apart with the cartoonish outfits you can dress your worms in, and the smoother graphics aid this point very well. Sound-wise, the game is basically similar to its older versions, albeit with much more detail and layers of orchestral sound. Having said that, most of the music doesn't have the same enjoyable melodies that the older games used to have, and you won't find anything particularly memorable about them. The nicest sounds actually come from the worms themselves, with a whole slew of different voices available to characterise your little creatures with. My own personal highlight is probably the Scottish ones, who are just the best thing in Worms since the Holy Hand Grenade. Worms WMD is an amazingly highly polished return to the old style of Worms game, and while the formula is clearly showing wear and tear, there is life yet in the Worms v Worms War Simulator. You'll probably have the most fun with this game if you play with friends, but that doesn't stop single players from finding enjoyment here. Score: 75 out of 100. Thanks for watching another Gaming Respawn Reviews. If you liked what you saw, feel free to click on our other video reviews for Unboxed or Seasons After Fall here. Or maybe you'd like to check out our other gaming news video here. If you like, you can also click our logo to go straight to our website for all the latest news, reviews and features. I have been your host Will. Once again, thanks for watching, and remember to keep playing.